at the Chris Salcedo Show. Glad you've tuned into the program. I want to introduce the folks to Dr. Andrew Bostom. He's a longtime friend, associate professor of family medicine at Brown University Medical School. He's the editor of highly acclaimed books on radical Islam. His latest, The Legacy of Islamic Anti-Semitism, it was just reissued with Dr. Bostom's updated 61-page preface. Dr. Bostom, welcome back to the Chris Salcedo Show.
Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Okay, let me go. I wrote down a laundry list here, and I want to tell the folks about it and tell you about it. Since Trump ordered the killing of General Qasem Soleimani, Iran has shot down an airliner, tried to blame the U.S. for it. Its people have risen up calling for the death of the regime. Iranians refuse to walk on images of the U.S. flag and Israeli flags on the ground, put there on the ground by the terrorist propagandists. An Iranian Olympian has defected, and now we're learning that two anchors on state-run TV are resigning, saying, we're sorry, Iranian people, for lying to you for 13 years. Are we seeing the end of this regime?
Obviously something that we hope for. I mean, given the nature of this regime, I think these protests are very, very different than what Iran experienced, for example, during the Obama administration. I mean, that was really sort of a shuffling of the deck. It was really Khomeinists of different factions. These demonstrations, which in fact have been going on since the beginning, on and off since the beginning of the Trump presidency, are really targeting the regime and all its supporters, regardless of minor differences between the supporters, literally calling for the end of the Sharia when people are bold enough. And this is again, Chris, very, very different than what was going on with the so-called Green Revolution, which really, again, when you looked at the leaders, the theological leaders of the Green Revolution and the political leaders, they were very much all Sharia supremacists. They may have been better than what evolved instead, the retention of power of Ahmadinejad, et cetera. But this is radically different, and this could foreshadow a return to a different kind of Iran that was much more Western and secular leaning, had its problems with autocracy, but was slowly moving towards a Western model under the Pahlavi Shahs.
That's very a good point. Now, I've made the comparison that under the Shah, Iran was more like modern day Egypt, kind of secular, yes, a little authoritarian, but at least they had a good relationship with the United States. Fair?
Yeah, yes, they did have a good relationship, and again, the Shah, the Pahlavi Shahs were very authoritarian. There's no question about that. We shouldn't minimize that. However, they were both anti-communist and anti-theocratic,
yep.
And they did improve the plight of women in particular in Iran. But they were very brutal in fighting back both the communists and the theocrats, and ultimately lost power. And that's one of the problems, Chris, is that we can be hopeful, but it seems that the very strong secular movement in Iran it leans communist,
right,
and theocratic movement, the traditional Muslim Shiite movement in Iran. Well, we've got almost 5 centuries of experience with that now.
Okay, well, handicap for me, because you mentioned Obama already. Handicap how Obama handled the uprising against the current totalitarian, radicalized Islamic fundamentalist regime to how Donald Trump, because look, we went over this yesterday. Obama just turned his back. Obama sidled up with the terrorist regime while Donald Trump is supporting those who are uprising in the streets right now. What could this be something real now that the people of Iran know they have a backing from the guy in the White House?
Well, look, Obama was very cynical. Now, he had one goal in mind, which was to broker this awful nuclear deal with Iran, which he forced through eventually. But I would point out that, I think, again, I think this was part of his cynical calculation, but he was at least right. He argued at the time, Chris, that and it was not for the honest reasons, but he argued at the time that he didn't see very much difference between the green revolutionaries and the ruling, the ruling elite in Iran. And I kind of agree with him on one level, but that was very disingenuous. He was doing anything he could to and he didn't really care about innocent people that were getting killed at that time.
Sure.
And this is radically different what Trump is doing now, and Trump is doing it for radically different reasons. I think Trump understands viscerally. He often gets things viscerally. I think he understands viscerally that this is a real uprising of people that are just fed up with the theocracy, fed up with the corruption, and Trump, wants them, if possible, to prevail, and certainly doesn't want to tolerate they're being crushed by this very brutal theocratic regime. He's sympathizing with them openly.
All right. Well, I want you to dip into your repertoire, if you will, of historical, of how big this could be historically, and then if we are seeing what I'm starting to see, which is an uprising, a potential changing of this totalitarian terrorist guard that has been in place since 1979. Put it in historical context and then give me commentary, if you will, on how the Democrat Party is receiving it and how their agents in the biased press is receiving it. Because Martha Raddatz, which we'll get to here in a minute, kids, Martha Raddatz on ABC News seemed to lament that all of a sudden there was discord in Iran and that the terrorist regime may be on its way out the door. And I was floored when she did. Yeah.
Okay. So we do have to sort through some things. First of all, again, we're at the level of hope at this point because, as recently as 2012, when there was, again, just a musical chairs rearrangement in Iran, frankly, according to Pew, 83% of Iranians still supported the Sharia. And in fact, they asked another question, which good pollsters will do to sort of validate that question in an indirect way. They asked, did the people they surveyed think that religious fanaticism was a problem in Iran? And only 28% felt it was. So now things can change radically in Iran. We've seen that before. And between 2012 and now, who's to say how dramatically attitudes may have changed? People may really have had a bellyful of this theocracy since 1979, and things could be changing. And obviously, the mass demonstrations suggest that things are, in fact, changing. So the people on the left, of all people, should support what's going on in the street, should support the people's blunt desire in some cases for rejecting theocracy. Absolutely, they should. Everyone should support that. No one in 2020 should be living in a strict Sharia-based society which doesn't tolerate even freedom of expression.
Yeah, exactly. And your take on the Democrats' reaction and how their agents in the press, like Martha Raddatz, they seem to be upset that the Trump doctrine may be paving the way for the reform in Iran. And I think there's palpable disappointment that Barack Obama giving them billions of dollars of their own money and billions of dollars of our money didn't work, and that Donald Trump punching them in the nose with the taking out of Qasem Soleimani may actually be the way to go. And they're really worried about Trump getting a victory more than the freedom of these Iranians who have been subjugated for so many years.
No, I think that's a completely accurate perception. And again, once Trump, who operates so viscerally, felt, first of all, it's America first. He was protecting Americans. He was retaliating for attacks on Americans. But beyond that, Trump believes that people have the right to self-determination. And he's certainly in openly showing support for the Iranians demonstrating in the street, and it could be a mixed bag. I mean, there could be secularists again who lean very hard left. There could be people who want something more like the system we have in the United States. It could be a very mixed bag. But but the common denominator does appear now to be rejection of this totalitarian theocratic state. And that's a good thing. And Trump knows that, and he's supporting it.
Dr. Andrew Bostom, everybody, Associate Professor of Family Medicine at Brown University. Here's the book, The Legacy of Islamic Anti-Semitism, reissued with 61 new pages of preface by Dr. Bostom. Sir, it's been far too long. We'll get you back on here on the Chris Salcedo Show. Appreciate your time and expertise.
Thanks so much, Chris. Take care.
You betcha.